Welcome to Lesson 10, the honest stage of migration mastery. The first 9 lessons taught you the engineering. This one tells you the truth. Most blog posts claiming Nginx is 5 times faster measure exactly one workload, static files at high concurrency, and then generalize to everything. That's marketing, not measurement. Across 6 real workloads run with WRK, Nginx wins 4 and Apache wins 2. Knowing which workload is yours decides whether migration earns you a 5 times gain or costs you 10%. Before we look at any numbers, let's lock down the methodology, because without controls, every benchmark is theater. 4 things stay constant: identical VMs, 8 vCPU, 16 gigs, GP3 SSD, same Ubuntu kernel, identical WordPress 6.4 stack down to the database rows, WRK driving load from a third VM so the test tool never steals cycles from the server, and 6 distinct workloads chosen to stress different bottlenecks: static of 3 sizes, cached PHP, live PHP, and TLS heavy. Only the web server changes between runs. That's what makes the comparison honest. And here's what those controls reveal: 6 workloads, 6 measurements, and the result is not a clean sweep. Nginx wins the static and TLS heavy work decisively. 2.7x on small CSS, 2.7x on TLS handshakes, 2.4x on cached PHP. But once you hit live, uncached PHP, the workload most real WordPress sites actually run, Apache edges ahead, 16% on a single connection, 5% under steady load. So when someone says Nginx is faster, the only honest reply is, at what? So let's name those Nginx wins precisely, because the architecture behind each one matters more than the number. Static files at high concurrency, send file plus epoll, 0 copy delivery, while Apache prefork is still allocating a process per connection. TLS handshakes, a single event loop juggling thousands of in-flight negotiations. Cached PHP through fast CGI cache, served from RAM in under a millisecond, intrinsic, not bolted on. And memory under load, 50 megabytes versus 800, because Nginx holds no per-connection state. The rule of thumb: if 70% or more of your traffic lives in these 4 signatures, migration is justified by measurement, not by trend. Now the part most blog posts quietly skip: Apache wins 2 workloads, and the reason is architectural, not accidental. Mod PHP runs inside Apache's own process, so there's no socket, no serialization, no IPC tax. At 1 to 10 concurrent users, your internal tools and admin dashboards, Apache is 16% faster because Nginx's async advantage has nothing to multiplex. And for live, uncacheable PHP at steady state, where fast CGI cache simply can't help, that tighter integration still wins by about 5%. If your workload looks like either of these, migrating isn't a gain, it's a measurable loss. Which brings us to the only slide that actually matters. Everything you've seen so far, the matrix, the architectural reasoning, even the Apache wins, none of it should be trusted on my word. So here's the bash: 2 identical VMs, 1 test client, WRK, 60-second runs, 5-minute warm-up, median of 3. Spin it up in an hour. Your numbers will differ from mine. Different app, different database, different network. That's the entire point. The methodology travels. The numbers don't. Trust yours, not mine. So you've run the benchmark. Now you need a decision. And there are really only 3 honest answers. If Nginx beats Apache by 2 times or more on your workload, migrate. The gain justifies the engineering cost. If Nginx wins by 10 to 50% on most routes, but Apache wins on some, coexist, run them side by side and stop pretending one tool fits everything. And if Apache wins, or the numbers are basically a tie, don't migrate. Spend that budget on your database or your CDN instead. That decision framework only works if you accept 3 uncomfortable truths. First, marketing benchmarks aren't lying, they're selecting. The vendor ran the one workload where they win and quietly omitted the rest. Second, Architecture creates trade-offs, never absolute winners. Nginx's event loop and Apache's process per connection model each dominate different scenarios, so the real question isn't which is best, but best for what. And third, migrations cost weeks of engineering and ongoing maintenance, so without a baseline and a post-migration number, you literally cannot prove it worked. No measurement, no migration. So here's the cheat sheet. Print it, pin it, bring it to your next migration meeting. Static-heavy, cacheable WordPress, JSON APIs, TLS-heavy mobile traffic. Nginx wins those, and the gains are real. 140 to 170%. But small internal tools and live uncached PHP? Apache still takes them, modestly but measurably. And if your traffic is genuinely mixed, stop arguing and go hybrid. Split the workload the way lessons 5 and 6 showed you. The conversation finally shifts from X versus Y to X for this, Y for that. Now it's your turn. 3 drills to turn theory into instinct. First, 60 minutes reproducing slide 3's matrix on your own hardware. If your numbers land within 30% of mine, your setup discipline is sound. Second, 30 minutes pulling 7 days of real access logs and identifying your dominant workload, because a recommendation without data is just opinion. Third, 30 minutes on the ROI math, with a 2 times safety factor on cost and half on gain. Senior engineers do all 3. The hints are there because I've watched people fail every one of these. Warm your caches, separate your test client, and don't lie to yourself about migration cost. Before you go run those drills, a warning about what you'll find when you Google for comparisons. 5 mistakes show up in nearly every internet benchmark, and each one bends the result by 2 to 10 times. Running the load generator on the same VM measures loopback, not network. Skipping warm-up catches cold caches and cold JITs. Testing one concurrency level hides the crossover where the winner flips. Not pinning hardware lets noisy neighbors swing results 30%. And toy apps measure web server overhead instead of real workload. The authors aren't lying, they're answering the wrong question. Now you know how to read them and how not to produce them yourself. So here's where Lesson 10 lands. 6 workloads measured, 4 wins for Nginx, 2 for Apache, and the ROI math sitting on the table in front of you. That's the honest stage. Real numbers, no myths. But the next move is the harder one. Lesson 11 is, when not to migrate, the cases where leaving Apache alone is the right call. Because migration as a default is expensive, sometimes wrong, and saying no is also engineering. See you there.